Before the Snap is looking at Ohio State, Penn State for our game of the week. And with two surprisingly mismatched teams, Frank, does Penn State have a realistic chance of beating Ohio State?
I think they have a chance because, obviously they lost as a huge favorite already a couple of times this year. And the last time they were more than 20-point underdogs back in 2013, they actually beat Wisconsin. So there's some history there. I think, though, they have to be able to do the basics, stop the run on defense. They have to be able to run the ball with Katron Allen and limit mistakes. And they just have to, I think, overall get some confidence, build on some positivity, which they just haven't been able to do during their 4-game losing streak.
On the other side, Joey, what do you think is the biggest key for Ohio State to keep winning?
I think complacency is a big thing for them. Can they avoid it? Because this is a team that does not have a lot of flaws on paper. They are really great on defense. There's been no drop-off despite losing 8 starters to the NFL from their defense last year, despite Jim Knowles going to Penn State and having a new defensive coordinator and having a redshirt freshman quarterback in Julian Sand. He does not make a lot of mistakes. He's only thrown 3 interceptions. So if Ohio State comes out, does what it's supposed to do, I don't see how they are vulnerable at all unless they get caught up on Penn State's winless record in the Big Ten.
Penn State is on a 4-game losing streak. It's rolling with interim coach Terry Smith and backup redshirt freshman quarterback is starting. Frank, what exactly is the state of Penn State football right now?
Well, I think they're trying to almost start a new season halfway through with the interim coach, a new quarterback. Everything that they wanted is really not on the table anymore. So the key to me is they're trying to make the circle smaller, regroup, refocus. And I think what we're looking for is, can we see from Penn State their most energetic, energized, inspired effort yet? We got a little bit of that against Iowa. We need to see more of it, I think, from their behalf. They need to see more of it against Ohio State.
Ohio State has 2 Heisman contenders at this point in the season with quarterback Julian Sand and wide receiver Jeremiah Smith. So, Joey, who do you think is the Buckeyes' best chance at the Heisman this year?
It's a good topic for conversation here because on the one hand, Jeremiah Smith is probably the biggest name in college football and is important as anybody to the Ohio State offense and would probably be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft were he to be eligible to declare. On the other hand, the case for a wide receiver is hard to make to win the Heisman because the position just doesn't tend to win the award all that much. 12 of the last 15 winners were quarterbacks. Only 4 receivers have won the Heisman Trophy since the 1970s. So if Ohio State is a top seed for the college football playoff, has an unbeaten regular season, if they finally beat Michigan, I think Julian Sand might end up being their better candidate by virtue of the position he plays, which is not the most exciting argument to make, but that's just the way Heisman voters typically side with these sort of races.
Ohio State versus Penn State, who wins and why?
Well, I think we're going to see a better effort than people expect from Penn State, trying to hang in there, make it close, give themselves a chance, but it's just too much to overcome against the number 1 team on their field in this environment, this place. I'm calling that Penn State does hang in through the 4th quarter, but it's going to be more like Ohio State 28, Penn State 15.
I'm very much in the same wavelength this is Frank here. I think Penn State has such a ability over the years to drag Ohio State into these physical Big Ten scrapes that are just never easy for Ohio State to come out totally unscathed. Even though they haven't lost in this series since 2016, they just don't typically run away with it. Penn State tends to keep it around 2 scores or less. And even though they've had so much turmoil in State College, I think the talent is such and the ability I think they have to make this a close game. So 31 to 14, somewhere in that realm feels about right for this one.
There are about a dozen college football coaching vacancies at this point in the season, so we're ranking the top openings, starting with LSU. LSU only has room to go up by its own standards at this point, despite Brian Kelly having a winning record, 34-14 in 4 seasons in Baton Rouge. But the problem is the Tigers were not competing for a national championship. They were rarely competing for an SEC championship. And that is very much what Brian Kelly was expected to do. And LSU only played in one SEC title game during his time there. And he was the only coach not to win a national championship with LSU this century. So the expectations are high, but there's plenty of room to work with in terms of recruiting, as well as with the talent that's already on this roster. This has to be the most appealing college football vacancy out there at this point.
Yeah, that's probably fair. And at number 2, and pretty close behind them, I would say, is Florida. Like, I think on balance, LSU probably the better job, but I think Florida has a ton of advantages. I mean, obviously, the sheer amount of talent in the state of Florida, really deep pockets, massive university, massive alumni base. And they were a little slow to adopt kind of the modern elements of college football, but they now have that infrastructure in place and have a lot to offer a coach. So I think this is very clearly a strong number 2 behind LSU.
The next one for me has to be Penn State. It's got to be one of the most appealing jobs in the country. Big name brand, Big Ten football. And of all the coaches fired so far this season, this one still remains the most surprising to me. Of course, James Franklin wasn't winning the big game, but he was winning a lot of games. Won 2 playoff games last year and had Penn State regularly in the national championship and Big Ten championship conversation. So big shoes to fill, regardless of how you felt about Franklin overall. But a new coach could energize this team. Again, there's a big recruiting pool to work with in addition to the talent already there. The name brand and the history of the school have to mean something. And so the only thing I think that might make some coaches a little hesitant is how little leeway after so much time Penn State gave Franklin.
Yeah, I think we're in agreement there. And I think we're probably also in agreement here that number 4 is Arkansas. Now, I think a pretty big drop off here from those 3 elite jobs. But with that being said, I mean, you're still talking about an SEC job with a ton of fan support. Obviously, just being in the SEC gives you access to TV revenue that you really can't get in any other conference outside the Big Ten. You know, I think some questions administratively at Arkansas. I know their AD has come under some criticism. Their money situation has not been as great as it could be. I think they, like a lot of other programs, are starting to rectify that, though. And this is going to be a competitive job in the marketplace, although maybe not as good as even some other potential SEC jobs that could still open from here.
It's college football week 10, and we've got some rapid fire straight up picks starting with Penn State at Ohio State. It's a real shame that this game isn't what it was supposed to be. And even if Penn State puts up a fight, Ohio State is definitely winning this one.
Yeah, this was supposed to be the game of the year in the Big Ten, and it's just not shaping up that way at all. Penn State in a complete collapse right now. I see no reason to believe they'll even be semi-competitive in this game. They may not score a point in this game, if I'm being perfectly honest.
Vanderbilt at Texas. I don't think this one is going to be a blowout either way. It could end up being Texas's 3rd straight overtime game, but I think Vandy comes away with a huge road win.
Yeah, I love Vandy. I love the story. I think they have some limitations, though, and I think the luck might actually run out here on the road. You know, Texas clearly has problems, but I think defensively they're still pretty solid. I think they'll find a way to avoid losing this game at home, although I expect it to be a close one.
Miami at SMU. Kevin Jennings and the Mustangs look like a dark horse contender for the ACC, but I think Miami wins a close one here.
Yeah, you know, I think Miami is extremely gettable, and I think I'd be surprised, honestly, if they didn't drop another one here coming down the stretch, but I don't think it happens here, even on the road. I think SMU has pretty obviously taken a big step back from last year's playoff squad.
Oklahoma at Tennessee. Oklahoma's defense showed weaknesses against Ole Miss last week, and I think Joey Aguilar and co will figure out how to beat it too.
Yeah, I mean, Tennessee has their own defensive issues, but I don't know if, frankly, this offense with John Mateer is capable of exploiting those. I think Oklahoma has significant issues. I don't like them to win this game in Knoxville at all.
Cincinnati at Utah. If this game was in Cincinnati, I might have considered going with a very talented Bearcats team, but Utah is hitting its stride, so I'm going with them at home.
Yeah, I think the thing with Utah is that they're not as physically dominant as they've been in the past, but I think if they're more physically dominant than you, they'll win pretty easily. And I still think they are the more physical dominant team here, especially playing at home. It's very hard to win in Salt Lake City.